From the Global Focus Newsroom, I am Gakunga Mwangi and this is the World Minute. Thank you for joining us as we dive into today's most pressing stories from Kenya and all across the world. You can keep up with the conversation on our social media handles at Global Focus with the hashtag the world on our social media handles at the World Minute KE with the hashtag the World Minute. These are tonight's top headlines.
Africa's climate risks as temperatures are projected to surpass 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2040. In Kenya, nearly half of the population is unaware of the government's affordable housing program. Meanwhile, conflict near Goma has displaced nearly thousands of people, and African nations push for stronger regional trade through new multilateral agreements.
Good evening. Africa has long been seen as one of the areas prone to the impacts of climate change, and recent studies have shown just how crucial this vulnerability is. According to a recent study, Africa may hit the 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming threshold by 2040, even in the case of low emissions. More frequent and severe droughts, floods, crop failures, and public health problems will result from that threshold, which is commonly referred to as the point of no return. However, scientists are not the only ones raising the alarm. Institutions and universities throughout the continent are starting to act. Academic settings are increasingly playing a significant role in the battle for climate resilience thanks to the student-led initiatives and an updated curriculum. Here is our report.
Africa is warming faster than most regions in the world. And new research now warns that the continent could cross the critical 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold by 2040, even under low emission scenarios. Scientists say this could trigger more frequent droughts, severe flooding, and unpredictable weather patterns, threatening food security and water supplies for millions. But there is a growing push for local solutions. Universities across Africa are integrating climate science into their programs, preparing students to respond to environmental challenges.
Some of the impacts that we expect and continue to impact Africa at the moment include one of them being hunger, the drought. Climate change has brought a lot of extreme weather patterns, where in most instances we have very severe floods, and other instances we have droughts, and as a consequence of that, we have hunger and droughts being a major impact of climate change. And will continue with this. This is going to continue if less action is taken. Other issues that we've seen that have impacting climate change as a result of climate change also includes water supply diversity. We have lost a lot of our reuse. We've lost our natural plants. Some of them have become extinct. Sometimes we wonder whether this time we're able to see our other clothes or lines. The question is whether if something is not done, whether our future generations will be able to see the alleys that we pride in as Africa.
Experts say that education and innovation may be Africa's strongest tools in building climate resilience.
Because the planet is what replenishes us, and as of so far, we haven't done a really good job respecting it and taking care of it. And it's the same planet that we're going to leave our children and our children's children and the people who will come after that.
As the clock ticks towards 2040, the fight against climate change is not just global, it's local, urgent, and happening right now. As Africa faces rising temperatures and more unpredictable weather patterns, the consequences of climate change are no longer just predictions, they are unfolding right before our eyes. Severe droughts are crippling farmlands, floods are displacing communities, and food insecurity is becoming a growing concern. For many, adapting to these changes is not a choice, but a necessity. But with local innovations, community resilience, and stronger climate policies, experts believe that there is still a path forward. The question remains, will action come quick enough? Reporting from Nairobi, I'm Shem Wikia for the World Minute.
Joining us now is our correspondent to talk about the issue at hand. Good evening. New findings suggest that Africa could cross the 1.5-degree warming threshold by 2040 even under low emission scenarios. What does that actually mean for the continent?
Thank you, Gakunga. It means Africa is likely to face more intense and frequent climate-related events like longer droughts, heavier floods, and reduced crop yields. These changes will hit vulnerable communities the hardest, especially those that rely on rain-fed agriculture. And because many of these impacts are already being felt, the urgency to act has never been greater.
We have seen global conferences and pledges, but on a local level, are we seeing any kind of practical response?
Yes, and some of the most promising responses are coming from universities and local institutions. In places like the University of Nairobi, students are learning how to build climate-resilient solutions from sustainable farming to clean energy projects. It's not just academic, these skills are being applied directly in communities that need them the most.
A fight that's both global and local. Thanks for that insight. Joining me as well is Brian Misiati and Christian Ngueni from Green Faith Africa. Thank you so much for joining us and for making the time. Africa, with low emissions, faces severe climate impacts. How does this highlight climate injustice, and what responsibility do high-emitting nations have to assist Africa?
All right. We all know that Africa is one of the leading continents that receive the highest brunt of climate change, despite us only emitting a very low percentage of greenhouse gas emissions. And to be specific, Africa emits only approximately 4% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. And like I said, when the damages, when the effects come, Africa gets hit very hard. We've witnessed floods, we've witnessed severe droughts hitting Africa, and therefore it becomes a justice issue because there are those countries or nations that went ahead to cause this problem by the way they industrialized or by the way they developed. And these countries, of course, are like China, the USA, let's just call them the global north. Countries or the most developed countries that are developed through burning of coal, during the industrialization, or you are exploring oil as a means of energy. And we all know what fossil fuel causes, or that fossil fuel are the largest causes of greenhouse gas emissions. And therefore, in Africa right now, our scientists, the bodies that are charged with, researching issues of climate change, which is the International Panel of the IPCC.
Thank you so much, Brian. So, as we all know, we as human beings, we are created to be the steward to the environment and the creation that God created. And when it comes to a time that we can no longer enjoy the resources that we are freely given by God, it becomes a challenge. Thereby, this is a time that we are here to advocate for justice, more so to the grassroots people, whereby we find that because of the effects of climate change, they undergo droughts, food insecurity, whereby we find that because of lack of rains, they don't get any food products, and it goes to famine, whereby people die, children suffer, and it is not good. So we advocate for justice on, again, basic needs, whereby we know that it is water, food, and clothing. And due to climate change, we find that our rivers are polluted due to the impact, due to the end product, the waste products caused by industrialization.
Given Africa's projected warning, what policies and agreements can help African nations get funding and resources for adaptation, and how can these be improved for fair access?
Well, I think climate finance is one of the areas that is still grey for the African continent. we have been time and again, approaching negotiations, I think, with the global north. Africa is a continent that is categorized under the global south, or those continents that are still, cannot or doesn't have resilience towards climate impacts. And so you find that when climate change hits, when we have droughts or floods, you find that we are highly impacted, and that is why we are a global south country. So there's a document called the Paris Agreement that was adopted in 2015 at COP. And the Paris Agreement stipulates a principle that is called the polluter pay principles that charge those countries that are global north with the responsibility of ensuring that they help or they support the global south countries to, build their resilience towards the impacts of climate change or the adverse effects of climate change. And so one of the policies in the Paris Agreement is called the NDCs, or the Nationally Determined Contributions. And the NDCs are, each country prepares their own NDCs, or the Nationally Determined Contributions, to say that within these maybe 5 years, we are going to reduce our emissions by this much. And it is upon now the global north countries to, fund the NDCs for the global south countries to ensure that these NDCs are achieved. So,
thank you so much for your time and wonderful insights. Moving on to our next story, one of Kenya's most pressing development issues is finding safe, alternative, and decent housing as the country's or cities grow and housing demand is rising. In response, the government started the Affordable Housing Program, a major initiative that aims to build thousands of new homes nationwide. However, a recent survey conducted showed that the results sparked worries. In spite of extensive construction and public advertising, about half of Kenyans are unaware that the program is even existing. Many people still have lingering questions about eligibility, costs, and clarity. What does this mean then for community involvement, public communication, and the actual obstacles to housing access? In this report, we examine the factors that contribute to the gap between the policy and the individual it is intended to assist, and our reporter has more on the story.
Kenya's affordable housing program was introduced to help ease the country's housing shortage, but almost half of Kenyans don't even know it exists. A recent survey shows that 46.4% of the population is unaware of the initiative, raising questions about how well the government has communicated the plan. Even among those who are aware, many remain skeptical, with concerns that homes are still too expensive or out of reach for average citizens. The government says it's working to improve awareness and transparency, focusing on better public outreach to rebuild trust and encourage more people to sign up. As demand for decent, affordable homes continues to rise, access to information may prove just as important as access to housing itself. Ruth Mongale, reporting from Nairobi, The World Minute.
Joining us now is James Munyori, a civil engineer and property developer with 30 years of experience. Mr. Munyori, thank you so much for joining us. In your own words, what is human settlement?
Well, I think it boils down to the basic human needs, which is food, clothing, and shelter. So human settlement basically falls under the shelter aspect of those basic human needs. And of course, settlement, it can be anything. It can be anything from market estates, luxurious villas, all the way down literally to Amanyata somewhere or someone controlled development. But it's all about settlement. But I believe for the purpose of this discussion, we are more or less talking about decent, sustainable, and functional human settlement.
What kind of housing options do you think people are really looking for when it comes to affordability and location?
That's a good question. And I would like to start by saying that affordable housing is a much broader issue, and I would like to tackle it as such. It's a much broader issue than the current affordable housing program by the government. I mean, affordable housing means, as we said, decent housing And there's been a big issue since colonial times, not even just since independence. And the reason being that, of course, in our former life, we used to stay in simple lives in villages, and the villages were okay. I mean, in the sense that the population was small. Probably, I would imagine by 1900, Kenyan population would have been maybe a few million people, maybe 5 or 4 million people, the whole country, and therefore the land mass could accommodate, in quotes, decent housing, which was very traditional, without the urban squeeze.
Most people are trusting these government housing projects. Why or why not?
Yes, there's a lot of skepticism about affordable housing. And once again, I'd like to emphasize, I'm not just talking about the current affordable housing government program. The skepticism arises from the fact that since independence, we've not had a sustained program that addresses the issue at a faster rate than the growth of the population. I mean, if you look at the countries like the famous Singapore, they were more or less, at par with us. By the time they were expelled from Malaysia in 1965, we were at par, and probably they were even a little bit behind. But they were able to sustain the housing program on a year-to-year basis to a level where virtually everybody is housed in a decent place in Singapore today.
Thank you so much for making the time. We appreciate your insights. We are now taking a short break. Don't forget to join the conversation on our social media at the World Minute KE and the hashtag the World Minute. We'll be right back after this. Do not go anywhere.
Kote nchini mbele tuendelee, mbele Kenya twende mbele,
Kenya
tuendelee,
twende mbele. NCBA, go for it.
Welcome back to the program. Keep the comments coming on social media. Our next story. In recent years, Africa has been redefining its role in global diplomacy, not just politically, but economically, with initiatives like the African Continental Free Trade Area, or the AFCFTA, and the COMESA EAC SADC Tripartite Free Trade Area Gaining Ground. Multilateralism is no longer just a diplomatic concept, it is becoming a lived economic reality. These frameworks are designed to strengthen trade, open borders, and create more opportunities for African countries to trade with each other and the world. But even as the agreements promise to boost regional integration, challenges remain, from infrastructure gaps and bureaucratic hurdles to concerns over whose voices are being heard at the negotiating table. In this segment, we explore how multilateralism is evolving in Africa and what these shifts could mean for trade, sovereignty, and regional cooperation going forward. Here is the report.
Africa is stepping into a new chapter of economic cooperation with the African Continental Free Trade Area and the Tripartite Free Trade Area, now in force. These initiatives aim to merge major trade blocs, COMESA, EAC, and SADC, into one vast market spanning over 700 million people.
The AFCFTA, as it stands today, is that the governments moved very fast from 2019, the governments of Africa and the African Union, and they came up with the AFCFTA agreement and all the protocols that are there of trade, services, competition, investment, free movement of persons and tariffs, and the whole lot. And there's a lot of movement that has taken place, and one of the commitments is that the African Union formed the AFCFTA Secretariat and established it in Accra, in Ghana, to push forward the agenda for multilateralism and integration of Africa. And we have seen a lot of protocols have been passed, and actually almost all of them have been passed on tariffs, on quotas, on competition, on investment, on intellectual property. So there is that feeling, that move that looks like it is going to be different this time, and there's a lot of programs that have come up already.
Advocates believe this will boost trade, create jobs, and reduce poverty across the continent. However, challenges like infrastructure gaps, political differences, and non-tariff barriers threaten progress. Experts stress that without strong political will and efficient implementation, these ambitious plans might fall short. As Africa moves towards economic unity, the world is watching to see if this bold step can truly transform the continent's economic landscape. We need better infrastructure and smoother custom processes. Without them, real progress will be hard to achieve. Reporting for World Minute, I'm Julie Mwaniki, Nairobi.
Talking to us is Mr. Benedict Rusengele, who is the Director of Trade and Customs at Trademark Africa. In your own words, what is multilateralism?
Yeah, multilateralism is a concept which has been coined globally, especially when we are focusing on several countries coming together, signing agreements and agreeing to implement them together, as well as the rules of implementing those agreements.
What are the advantages and disadvantages of a country like Kenya to be involved in these agreements?
As we all know, Kenya as a country is not an autarky, meaning that it cannot produce all what it needs for itself, and therefore it has to collaborate with the other countries so as to obtain what its citizens requires to consume, and it doesn't have the ability to produce. And therefore multilateralism is very critical for Kenya, for it bridges the gap between what they produce and what the citizens do demand.
And with most African countries now ratifying the the AfCFTA, what does this predict about the continent's readiness to strengthen regional trade through multilateral cooperation?
Yes, as you know, the AfCFTA presents a great opportunity to the African continent because it brings itself a large market of around 1.5 trillion people and a combined GDP of 3.4 trillion. This means that with 54 states of Africa coming together under the AfCFTA, it creates opportunities for enhanced production, strengthening industrializations, job creation, and also gives Africa that strength to be able to negotiate in the global forum.
And in your opinion, how important is trade finance in helping African countries fully participate in a trade system like the AfCFTA?
Of course, for you to produce, to participate in the AfCFTA, you must have what to trade. And for you to have what to trade, you must produce enough for your citizens and have surplus to trade across the globe. And therefore, trade finance becomes very critical as a catalyst for trade. Because as we know, for goods to be moved across borders, one, you need to produce goods which meet the required standards, as well as what we call phytosanitary and sanitary measures.
Thank you so much for your time. And on to our final story. The migrating situation in Central and East Africa is still shaped by conflict and nowhere is this more violent than the Eastern DRC today. Nearly 300,000 people, particularly women and children, have been forced to evacuate their homes since early February due to fresh fighting near Goma, seeking refuge in already overcrowded displacement shelters. These families are part of a bigger crisis of years of continuous violence and have forced nearly 7 million people to flee their homes nationwide. On the ground, humanitarian groups are alerting people to acute shortages of food, water, shelter, and medical attention. This is the report.
Fighting near Goma in eastern DRC has forced nearly 300,000 people to flee their homes since early February, most of them women and children. These newly displaced people join over 7 million others already uprooted by conflict, making this one of Africa's largest internal displacement crises.
Reports of rapes committed by fighters, looting of property, including of a humanitarian warehouse, and humanitarian and health facilities being hit.
Conditions in overcrowded camps remain dire, with limited shelter, food, and access to healthcare, especially for vulnerable groups. The International Organization for Migration is calling for urgent global support, warning that without immediate assistance, the situation could worsen quickly. As conflict continues, many families in Goma wait, not just for help, but for peace and the chance to return home. Reporting for the World Minute, I'm Jacqueline Kitamba.
With us now is Madam Wasian Musioni, who is a humanitarian development practitioner working for an international organization based in Damascus, Syria. Madam Musioni, thank you so much for your time. The displacement in Goma reveal about the broader migration trends within the Great Lakes region, and what are the implications for neighboring countries?
Okay. I think the starting point is to realize that what is happening in Goma now is not new. Displacement within the Great Lakes region has always been there. So the region has experienced protracted conflicts over the years. And so the current situation that we see in Goma is just a continuation of a situation that has been existing for a very long time. So what does this review? I think the first thing that this reviews, like I've said, it's just the regional instability within that region, and organizations or actors who have got an interest in the Great Lakes region need to be aware of this, the regional instability situation. Then the other thing that this reviews is the whole issue of displacement, both internally within DRC, but also externally to mainly the region. So sometimes it is Congolese refugees are in Rwanda. They also move over to sometimes to Burundi, to Uganda, and even as far as Tanzania.
How can international migration systems be strengthened to better respond to rapid and large-scale internal displacements caused by conflict?
I think for me the first thing is about coordination, because you find that when there's a displacement, many actors come in to respond to the crisis, whether they are international organizations or whether it is a UN system or even the neighboring countries. But often each of these actors work alone, so there's no coordination. Sometimes there's even competition between fast responders. So the whole question of coordination is crucial. There is also the question about funding. We all are aware of what has happened with the reduction of funding by the United States. And one of the agencies that is very much affected is UNHCR, which deals with refugees. So I think one of the things that people have to really think about when we talk about displacements is about funding and adequate funding to people responding to displacement. I think those are probably the key things that I can think about.
The gaps in infrastructure, coordination, or funding determine effective protection and resettlement of displaced populations across borders.
If we have seen a lot of situations like we are witnessing now with in DRC, even other places around the world where we have had displacement, infrastructure gaps, for example, where do these people go? So the quickly put up shelters, the quickly put up camps usually lack adequate shelter. Often they are overcrowded. They miss basic services like health, like schools, like sanitation facilities, and therefore people's dignity is compromised. So they also, people get separated, so there are possibilities of trafficking, particularly of young people and children, because they are separated with their primary caregivers. So all those things need to be taken into consideration. There's also increased gender-based violence because of the overcrowding, the lack of facilities. So all those are things that need to be taken into consideration. You have also talked about, we had talked about coordination. I've said that usually people wanting to do good, but their response is not coordinated. They don't share information. They don't even coordinate with the host government. So you just get a whole group of international responders flying in to start helping with the refugees, but they are not coordinating with the local authorities. They are not coordinating with the host communities, and this sometimes, like I've said, could lead to tensions, not just with the local authorities and the local communities, but also with the host governments. Then if the actual cause of displacement is not addressed, then displacement becomes protracted. So you find people who have grown up in camps, they were born in camps, and this just becomes a continuation of displacement. Examples are, we've seen what has happened in the displacement camps in Kenya, for example, in Kakuma or in Dadaab.
Thank you so much for your time. That is all we have for you tonight on the World Minute. Here's a recap of tonight's top stories. Africa is on track to reach the critical 1.5 degree global warming threshold by 2040, with scientists warning of an urgent consequence for food security, public health, and regional stability. In Kenya, nearly half of the citizens remain unaware of the government's affordable housing program, raising concerns about communication gaps and public access. In eastern DRC, renewed conflict near Goma has displaced close to 300,000 people in just a few months, most of them women and children, deepening one of the region's largest humanitarian crises. And finally, as Africa's regional trade agreements gain momentum, questions are emerging about how multilateralism is shaping economic cooperation, whether all nations benefit equally. That is all from us this evening. For those stories and more, follow us on our digital platforms at the 1 Minute KE or our website globalfocus.co.ke. And from the entire team here, thank you for watching and good night.